This is my true story. I am Miss Bernice Carter, 70 years old, and if you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Because what I'm about to share is the kind of tale that will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the strength of a woman who's been underestimated for far too long. The night it all began, the house was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses, the air thick with the scent of fried catfish and sweet potato pie, the kind of food that brings people together and makes them feel at home. It was our silver wedding anniversary, 25 years of marriage to Franklin Carter, a man I once believed would stand by me until the end. Our children, friends, and neighbors filled the living room, their faces glowing in the soft light, everyone waiting for Franklin's big speech, the one he'd been hinting at for weeks. I stood by the window, my heart full of gratitude and a little bit of pride, thinking about all we'd built together. The house, the family, the life that had weathered storms and celebrated joys. But as Franklin tapped his glass and called for silence, I felt a strange chill run down my spine, a whisper of warning I couldn't quite place. He stood tall in his best suit, his mother, Mrs. Pearl, beaming at his side, and for a moment I thought he might finally say the words I'd been longing to hear. "Thank you, Bernice, for standing by me, for loving me, for making this house a home." Instead, he cleared his throat, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Bernice, after 25 years, I think it's time we both moved on. I've found someone new, someone who makes me feel young again. I want a divorce." The room went silent, the only sound the slow drip of the kitchen faucet and the distant hum of the city outside. My hands went numb, the glass slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor. I stared at Franklin, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd loved, but all I saw was cold determination. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, holding it out to me like a gift. "These are the divorce papers. I want you out of the house by tomorrow. Tiana and I will be moving in." The words hit me like a slap, the humiliation burning hotter than any fire. I looked around the room, saw the shock and pity on the faces of my friends, the confusion in my children's eyes, and the smug satisfaction on Mrs. Pearl's face. Tiana, a woman half my age with a smile as sharp as a knife, stood in the doorway, her arm looped through Franklin's, already acting like she owned the place. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand an explanation, but all I could do was stand there frozen as my world crumbled around me. Franklin's voice was cold, almost rehearsed. "You can take whatever you want, but you need to be gone by morning. This is my house now." I felt the blood drain from my face, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the whispers that rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Pearl stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's for the best, Bernice. You've had your time. Let Franklin be happy." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I looked at my children, their faces pale and stunned, and forced myself to stand tall. "I'll leave when I'm ready," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "This house is as much mine as it is his." Franklin scoffed, waving the papers in my face. "Not anymore. You signed everything over years ago, remember?" My mind raced, trying to recall every document, every signature, every moment I trusted him without question. Had I really given up my rights, or was this just another one of Franklin's tricks? The party ended in a flurry of awkward goodbyes, the guests slipping out into the night, their eyes full of questions they were too afraid to ask. I stood in the empty living room, the silence pressing in on me, the weight of betrayal settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. As I gathered the shattered glass and wiped away the tears, I made a promise to myself. I would not be broken. I would not let Franklin, Tiana, or Mrs. Pearl take everything I'd worked for. They thought I was weak, that I would just walk away without a fight. But they were about to learn that a woman like me doesn't give up that easy. And as I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I knew this was just the beginning. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes from the deepest wounds, and I was ready to show them all just how strong I could be. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with memories and questions, the shadows in my bedroom stretching long and cold across the walls. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Franklin's face, heard the echo of his words. I want a divorce. I want you out by morning. And felt the sting of humiliation all over again. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the years I'd given him, the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd set aside so he could chase his own. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up late, balancing the checkbook, making sure the bills were paid, the meals I'd cooked, the birthdays I'd planned, the way I'd held our family together through every storm. And now, after 25 years, he was throwing me away like yesterday's news, trading me in for a younger model and acting like I should be grateful for the chance to walk away with nothing. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I forced myself out of bed, my body aching with exhaustion and anger. I moved through the house in a daze, packing a small bag with the things that mattered most. My mother's Bible, a photo of my children as babies, the gold locket Franklin gave me on our 10th anniversary, back when I still believed in forever. Downstairs, the house was eerily quiet, the remnants of last night's party scattered across the dining room table, the smell of cold coffee and disappointment hanging in the air. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands shaking as I tried to steady my nerves. That's when I heard voices in the hallway, Franklin and Mrs. Pearl, their words muffled but urgent. I crept closer, pressing my ear to the door, my heart pounding. "She'll be gone by noon," Franklin was saying, his tone sharp. "I don't care what she says, Mama. The house is mine. I've got the papers to prove it." Mrs. Pearl's voice was low and conspiratorial. "Just make sure she doesn't find out about the account. If she gets her hands on that money, you'll be the one out on the street." My breath caught in my throat. What account? What money? I stepped back, my mind racing. Had Franklin been hiding something from me all these years? Was there more to this betrayal than just another woman? I slipped back into the kitchen, my tea forgotten, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and determination. I knew then that I couldn't just walk away, not until I knew the whole truth. I spent the morning searching through drawers and cabinets, looking for anything that might give me a clue. In Franklin's study, I found a locked drawer, the key still in the lock. Inside was a thick envelope labeled Plan B, stuffed with bank statements, legal documents, and a letter from a lawyer I'd never heard of. My heart pounded as I flipped through the papers, my eyes widening as I realized what I was looking at. Accounts in my name, investments I didn't remember making, and a balance that made my head spin. Over $3 million tucked away in mutual funds, real estate and savings accounts, all legally mine. I sat down hard, the weight of the discovery nearly knocking the breath out of me. All those years I'd trusted Franklin to handle the finances, never questioning his decisions, never suspecting he might be hiding something from me. But here it was in black and white, proof that I was far from broke, that I had more power than I'd ever realized. I felt a surge of anger, but also a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as helpless as Franklin thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn the tables on him. As I sat there, the doorbell rang, jolting me back to reality. It was Tiana, her smile as fake as the diamonds on her fingers. "Just checking to see if you're gone yet," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Franklin and I have big plans for this place." I stared at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I'll leave when I'm good and ready," I replied, my voice cold. And not a moment before. She rolled her eyes, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you." As she turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Franklin watching from the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable. I knew then that the real battle was just beginning. I spent the rest of the day gathering my things, making copies of every document I could find, and calling my best friend Mavis for advice. "Don't let them bully you, Bernice," she said, her voice fierce. "You've got more strength in your little finger than Franklin has in his whole body. Stand your ground." Her words gave me the courage I needed. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would not be pushed out of my own home. I would not let Franklin, Tiana, or Mrs. Pearl take what was rightfully mine. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. Because sometimes the only way to survive is to fight back, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke with a fire in my belly I hadn't felt in years, the kind of determination that comes from knowing you've been wronged, but you're not about to let it stand. I moved through the house with purpose, my senses sharper than ever, every sound and shadow telling me something new. The sun was barely up when I heard Franklin on the phone in the living room, his voice low and urgent. "She's still here, Mama." I told her to leave, but she's being stubborn. "I'll handle it, don't worry." I stood in the hallway, out of sight, listening as Mrs. Pearl's voice crackled through the speaker. "You better, Franklin. Tiana's not going to wait forever, and neither am I. We need that house in our name before the end of the month." My jaw clenched, anger and disbelief swirling inside me. So that was it, they wanted me out, not just for Franklin's new life but for some bigger plan, something that involved money and control. I slipped back to my room, my mind racing. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I couldn't let them see me sweat. I called Mavis, my hands shaking as I explained what I'd overheard. "Girl, you need to get yourself a lawyer," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Don't sign a thing, don't leave that house, and don't let them bully you. You've got rights, Bernice. Use them." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. I spent the morning making a list of everything I needed to do. Find a lawyer, secure my documents, and figure out exactly what Franklin and Mrs. Pearl were plotting. As I was sorting through the files I'd copied the day before, I found a letter from my late father tucked inside my old recipe book. His handwriting was shaky but familiar, the words a balm to my wounded heart. "Always keep something for yourself, Bernice. Never let anyone take your dignity or your future." Tears pricked my eyes, but I wiped them away, feeling his strength settle over me like a warm blanket. Around noon, Franklin stormed into the kitchen, his face red with frustration. "Why are you still here?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the counter. "I told you to leave. Tiana and I have plans for this house." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice calm and steady. "This house is as much mine as it is yours, Franklin. You can't just throw me out because you found someone new." He sneered, waving the divorce papers in my face. "You signed everything over years ago. You don't have a leg to stand on." I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "We'll see about that." He glared at me, but I could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes. He wasn't as sure as he pretended to be. That afternoon I called Ms. Daniels, a lawyer Mavis had recommended. She listened patiently as I explained my situation, her questions sharp and to the point. "Bring me everything you have, bank statements, deeds, any correspondence. We'll go through it together and see exactly where you stand." I gathered my documents and headed to her office, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Ms. Daniels was a force of nature, her presence commanding and her mind razor-sharp. As she flipped through the papers, her eyes narrowed. "Franklin's been busy, but he's not as clever as he thinks. The house is still in both your names, and these accounts are legally yours. He can't touch them without your consent." Relief washed over me, but Ms. Daniels wasn't finished. "I want you to keep this quiet for now. Don't let him know what you found. Let him think he's winning. Meanwhile, I'll start gathering evidence of any financial misconduct." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and newfound confidence. As I left her office, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I knew the road ahead would be hard, but for the first time since Franklin's betrayal, I felt like I had a fighting chance. That night, as I sat in my bedroom, I heard Franklin and Tiana laughing downstairs, their voices echoing through the halls that used to be filled with love and family. I clenched my fists, vowing not to let them take another piece of me. I was Miss Bernice Carter, and I was done being the victim. The next move was mine, and I was ready to play my hand. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and quiet strategy, every moment in that house feeling like a test of wills. Franklin strutted around as if he already owned everything, his voice louder, his laughter forced, while Tiana paraded through the living room in her high heels and expensive perfume, making little comments about fresh starts and modernizing the place. I kept my head down, but inside I was watching, listening, and learning. Every time Franklin left the room, I checked the mail, the drawers, the trash, anything that might give me another clue about what he and Mrs. Pearl were planning. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the guest room, I heard Tiana on the phone in the hallway, her voice sharp and impatient. "No, I told you she's still here. Franklin said it would be handled by now. I'm not waiting forever." She paused, then added, "If she finds out about the loan, we're both in trouble." My heart skipped. What loan? I waited until she left, then slipped into Franklin's study, searching through the desk drawers. That's when I found it, a loan application with my forged signature, dated just a few weeks ago, and a letter from the bank warning of default if payments weren't made. My hand shook as I realized the depth of Franklin's betrayal. He wasn't just trying to push me out. He was risking everything we built, gambling with our future for the sake of his new life. I snapped photos of every document, my anger simmering into something cold and sharp. That evening I called Ms. Daniels and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "This is exactly what we needed, Bernice. Keep everything safe. Don't confront him yet. Let's build our case." I agreed, but it took everything in me not to march downstairs and throw the evidence in Franklin's face. Instead, I played my part, acting tired and defeated, letting him believe he was winning. But inside I was gathering strength, fueled by every lie, every insult, every smug look from Tiana. The next morning, Mrs. Pearl showed up unannounced, her eyes cold and calculating. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her voice low and threatening. "You need to stop fighting, Bernice. You're only making things harder for yourself. Franklin deserves to be happy, and you're standing in the way." I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm not going anywhere, Pearl. This is my home, too." She leaned in, her words like poison. "You think you're so clever, but you're just an old woman clinging to the past. You'll be out of here soon enough." I watched her leave, my resolve hardening. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my children, about the legacy I wanted to leave behind. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every woman who'd ever been told she was too old, too weak, too expendable. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, and my right to decide when my story ended. As the house settled into silence, I whispered a promise to myself. I will not be erased. I will not be broken. And when the time comes, I will make sure Franklin, Tiana, and Mrs. Pearl regret ever underestimating me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Franklin banging pots in the kitchen, his mood foul and his words clipped. Tiana was nowhere to be seen, and Mrs. Pearl had left early, but the tension in the house was thick enough to slice with a knife. I moved quietly, careful not to provoke Franklin, but every glance he threw my way was full of impatience and contempt. "You're still here," he muttered, not even bothering to look at me. "I thought you'd have the decency to leave by now." I ignored him, pouring myself a cup of coffee and sitting at the table, my mind racing with everything I'd learned. I could feel the walls closing in, but I also felt a strange sense of calm, like the eye of a storm. I knew I had the evidence, the law, and my own wits on my side. I just needed to wait for the right moment. Later that day, Mavis stopped by, her arms full of groceries and her eyes full of concern. "You holding up, Bernice?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, grateful for her presence. I'm doing better than they think, I whispered, showing her the photos of the forged loan documents and the bank letters. Mavis's eyes widened. Girl, you've got them right where you want them. Just keep your head down and let your lawyer handle the rest. We spent the afternoon baking cornbread and talking about old times, the kitchen filling with the warm, familiar smells of home. For a few hours, I almost forgot about the mess waiting for me upstairs. But as evening fell, Franklin returned, his face red and his voice raised. I just got off the phone with the bank, he snapped. They said there's been some activity on the account. Are you trying to move money behind my back? I looked him dead in the eye, my voice steady. I'm just making sure my interests are protected, Franklin. You should do the same. He glared at me, his fists clenched, but I saw the fear flicker in his eyes. He knew the game was changing and he didn't like it one bit. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Franklin and Tiana arguing in the hallway, their voices sharp and desperate. You said this would be easy, Tiana hissed. You promised me the house, the money, everything. Now you're telling me she's not leaving. Franklin's reply was muffled, but I caught enough to know he was losing control. Just give me more time, Tiana. I'll handle it. I smiled in the darkness, knowing that every day I stayed, every document I saved, every lie I uncovered was another nail in the coffin of their little scheme. The next morning, I called Ms. Daniels and gave her an update. They're getting desperate, I said. It won't be long now. She agreed, her voice full of quiet confidence. Just keep doing what you're doing, Bernice. The truth is on your side. As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of hope. I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. And soon everyone would know it. The days that followed were a masterclass in patience and silent strength. I moved through the house like a ghost, watching Franklin unravel as his plans began to slip through his fingers. Tiana grew more restless, her voice sharper, her presence colder. She spent hours on her phone, pacing the living room, whispering to someone I couldn't see. I caught snippets. He promised me everything. She's still here. I'm not waiting forever. The tension between her and Franklin grew until it was impossible to ignore. One evening, I found Tiana in the kitchen, her eyes red and her hands trembling as she poured herself a glass of wine. She looked at me, her mask slipping for just a moment. You know, you could make this easier on everyone if you just left, she said, her voice brittle. I met her gaze, my own voice calm and steady. I'm not leaving my home, Tiana. Not for you, not for anyone. She scoffed, but I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. That night, as I sat in my room, I heard Franklin and Mrs. Pearl arguing downstairs. You said you had this under control, Mrs. Pearl snapped. If Bernice finds out about the other account, we're finished. You need to get her out before she starts asking questions. Franklin's reply was desperate, his confidence crumbling. I'm trying, Mama, but she's not budging. She's got a lawyer now, and I think she knows more than she's letting on. I smiled to myself, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The tables were turning, and they knew it. The next morning, I met with Ms. Daniels, handing over the latest batch of evidence, bank statements, emails, and the forged loan documents. She reviewed everything with a keen eye, her confidence growing with every page. You've done everything right, Bernice. We have enough to not only protect your assets but to expose Franklin's fraud if it comes to that. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, hope blooming in my chest. As I left her office, I ran into Mavis, who hugged me tight and whispered, "You're almost there, girl. Just a little longer." That afternoon, Franklin announced he was throwing a big anniversary party. One last attempt to save face in front of the community, to show everyone he was still in control. He invited everyone we knew, parading Tiana around like a trophy, acting as if nothing was wrong. I watched from the sidelines, dressed in my finest, my head held high. The house was filled with laughter and music, but beneath the surface, I could feel the cracks spreading. During the party, I overheard Tiana and Mrs. Pearl arguing in the hallway, their voices sharp and panicked. "You said Franklin had money. Where is it? I'm not staying if he can't deliver." Mrs. Pearl hissed back. "Just keep playing your part. Once Bernice is gone, everything will be ours." I slipped away, my heart pounding, knowing the time for silence was almost over. That night, as the last guest left and the house fell quiet, I stood in the living room, looking at the photos on the wall, the memories of a life I'd built with my own hands. I whispered a promise to myself. Tomorrow I take back everything they tried to steal. Tomorrow the truth comes out. The morning after the party, the house felt different, emptier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. I woke early, my mind clear and my heart steady, knowing that today was the day I would stop playing the victim and start reclaiming my life. I dressed with care, choosing a deep burgundy dress and my mother's pearl earrings, a quiet armor for the battle ahead. Downstairs, Franklin was already up, his face drawn and his eyes shadowed with worry. Tiana sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her lips pressed into a thin, impatient line. Mrs. Pearl arrived soon after, her presence as chilly as the morning air. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from them, my hand steady, my gaze unwavering. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but commanding. Franklin looked up, startled, but before he could speak, I continued. "I know about the loan, Franklin. I know about the forged signature, the secret account, and the money you've been hiding. I know about the threats, the lies, and the games you've been playing with Tiana and your mother." The room went silent, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Tiana's eyes widened, her phone slipping from her hand. Mrs. Pearl's face turned pale, her composure cracking for the first time. Franklin tried to bluster his way through, but his voice shook. "You don't know what you're talking about, Bernice. You're confused." I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I'm not confused, Franklin. I've been patient, but I'm done letting you treat me like a fool. I have every document, every email, every bank statement. My lawyer has copies, and if you try to push me out, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done." Tiana stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You said this would be easy, Franklin. You said she'd be gone by now." Mrs. Pearl glared at her son, her voice trembling with rage. "You promised us, Franklin. You said you had it under control." Franklin's mask slipped, desperation etched across his face. "Just calm down, all of you. We can work this out." I shook my head, my voice steady and strong. "There's nothing left to work out. You tried to steal my home, my money, and my dignity. But you forgot who you were dealing with. I built this life from nothing, and I won't let you take it from me." The tension in the room was electric, every eye on me as I stood and gathered my things. "I'm meeting with my lawyer this afternoon. If you're smart, you'll start packing your bags. Because by the end of the week, this house will be mine, and you'll have nothing left but your regrets." I walked out, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration, knowing that the hardest part was over. I had faced them, spoken my truth, and taken back my power. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years, ready for whatever came next. The battle wasn't finished, but the war was turning in my favor, and I was determined to see it through to the end. That afternoon, I walked into Ms. Daniels' office with my head held high, clutching the folder of evidence that had become my shield. She greeted me with a warm smile and a firm handshake, her confidence a balm to my nerves. We sat together at her desk, reviewing every document, every email, every bank statement I'd collected. "Bernice, you've done everything right," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "With this, we can not only protect your assets but expose Franklin's fraud and Tiana's manipulation. They won't see it coming." I felt a surge of hope, mixed with a bittersweet ache for all the years I'd spent trusting the wrong people. Ms. Daniels drafted a letter to Franklin's lawyer, laying out our case in clear, unyielding terms, The forged loan, the secret account, the threats, and the evidence of financial misconduct. We're giving them 48 hours to respond, she explained. If they don't back down, we'll take this to court, and with the community behind you, they don't stand a chance. I left her office feeling lighter, the weight of fear replaced by a quiet determination. On my way home, I stopped by Mavis's house, needing the comfort of her steady presence. She hugged me tight, her laughter ringing through the kitchen as we shared a pot of tea and talked about everything but Franklin. You're almost there, Bernice, she said, squeezing my hand. Don't let up now. They're on the ropes. That evening, as I returned home, I found Franklin pacing the living room, his face pale and drawn. Tiana was nowhere to be seen, and Mrs. Pearl sat in the corner, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. Franklin thrust a letter at me, his hands shaking. What is this, Bernice? You're threatening to take me to court. I met his gaze, my voice calm and steady. I'm not threatening, Franklin. I'm protecting myself. You brought this on yourself when you tried to steal what wasn't yours. He sputtered, searching for words, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. Mrs. Pearl stood, her voice trembling with rage. You think you've won, but this isn't over. We'll fight you every step of the way. I shook my head, my resolve unbreakable. You can try, but the truth is on my side. And so is the law. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Franklin on the phone, his voice desperate and broken. She's got everything, Mama. The lawyer says we don't have a chance. What are we going to do? Mrs. Pearl's reply was cold and bitter. You should have listened to me, Franklin. Now look where we are. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of their defeat wash over me. For the first time in months, I slept soundly, knowing that justice was finally within reach. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Tiana packing her things. Her footsteps hurried and angry as she stormed out of the house without a word. Franklin sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, while Mrs. Pearl glared at me from across the room. I poured myself a cup of coffee, savoring the taste of victory, and prepared for the final battle. The end was near, and I was ready to claim what was rightfully mine. The house was eerily quiet after Tiana's departure, the kind of silence that settles in after a storm, heavy with the weight of everything that's been lost and everything that's about to change. Franklin barely spoke, shuffling from room to room like a man twice his age, his bravado gone, replaced by a hollow kind of fear. Mrs. Pearl kept to herself, her sharp tongue dulled by the reality that her schemes had finally caught up with her. I moved through the house with a new sense of purpose, reclaiming each room, each memory, each piece of myself that I'd let slip away over the years. I called my children, inviting them over for dinner, wanting them to see that their mother was still standing, still fighting, still whole. That evening, the house was filled with laughter and the smell of my famous gumbo. The kind of warmth that can only come from family. My son Marcus hugged me tight, his eyes shining with pride. Mama, I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. I should have protected you. I smiled, brushing a tear from his cheek. You're here now, baby. That's all that matters. My daughter Denise squeezed my hand, her voice trembling. We're with you, Mama. Whatever happens next, we're not letting you go through it alone. Their words gave me strength, a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them, for our family, for every woman who'd ever been told she was too old, too weak, too easy to push aside. After dinner, as we sat around the table, I told them everything. The forged loan, the secret account, the threats, and the evidence Ms. Daniels had gathered. Marcus's jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes. He's not getting away with this, Mama. Not after everything you've done for him. Denise nodded, her voice fierce. We'll stand with you in court. We'll tell everyone what really happened. I felt a surge of gratitude, my heart swelling with love and pride. The next day, Ms. Daniels called with news. Franklin's lawyer wants to settle. They know they can't win in court. They're offering to sign over the house and all joint assets in exchange for dropping the fraud charges. I took a deep breath, the weight of the past few months pressing down on me. Tell them I'll agree, but only if they leave by the end of the week, and never contact me again. Miss Daniels agreed, her voice full of admiration. You did it, Bernice. You took back your life. That night as I walked through the house, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The battle was almost over, but I knew the scars would linger. Still, I was ready to start again, to rebuild, to live on my own terms. As I stood at the window watching the stars blink to life in the night sky, I whispered a prayer of thanks, for strength, for justice, for the chance to begin anew. The final chapter was about to be written, and this time I was holding the pen. The days leading up to Franklin and Mrs. Pearl's departure felt like a slow, sweet exhale after holding my breath for far too long. I watched as Franklin packed his things in silence, his shoulders slumped, the weight of his choices finally settling on him. Mrs. Pearl moved through the house with a bitterness that clung to her like a second skin, her eyes darting away from mine every time we crossed paths. I didn't gloat, didn't throw their failures in their faces. I simply let the truth speak for itself, my dignity intact. On their last morning, Franklin paused in the doorway, his suitcase in hand, and looked at me with a mixture of regret and disbelief. I never thought it would end like this, Bernice, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I met his gaze, my own voice gentle but unyielding. You made your choices, Franklin. Now you have to live with them. Mrs. Pearl didn't say a word, just brushed past me, her pride wounded beyond repair. As the door closed behind them, I stood in the quiet, sunlit hallway, feeling a wave of relief and sorrow wash over me. I had lost a husband, but I had found myself again. That afternoon, I called my children and Mavis, inviting them over for a small celebration. We cooked together, filling the house with the smells of fried chicken, collard greens, and peach cobbler, the laughter and music echoing through every room. Marcus raised a glass, his eyes shining. To Mama, the strongest woman I know. You taught us what it means to fight for what's right. Denise hugged me tight, her voice thick with emotion. You showed us that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way back to the light. I smiled, my heart full, knowing that the pain and struggle had not been in vain. That evening, as the sun set and the house grew quiet, I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the photos, the memories that made this place a home. I sat on the porch with Mavis, sipping sweet tea and watching the fireflies dance in the warm night air. You did it, Bernice, she said, her voice full of pride. You took back your life. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. I'm not done yet, Mavis. There's still so much I want to do. She grinned, squeezing my hand. Then let's get started. As the stars blinked to life above us, I felt a sense of peace and possibility I hadn't known in years. The past was behind me, the future wide open, and for the first time, I was free to write my own story. But just as I was about to head inside, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened it, my heart skipping as I read the words. I heard what you did, Miss Bernice. You inspired me. I want to meet you. I looked up at the night sky, a smile spreading across my face. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a beacon for others, a reminder that no matter how hard life tries to break you, you can always rise again. And I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new world, one where the air was lighter and every sunrise brought a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. I spent my mornings tending the garden, letting the rich earth run through my fingers, and my afternoons in the kitchen, teaching Denise and Marcus the old family recipes that had once filled our home with laughter. The house, once heavy with secrets and sorrow, now echoed with the sound of my grandchildren's feet on the hardwood floors and the music of their laughter as they played hide-and-seek in the hallways. Mavis visited often, her presence a steady comfort, and together we dreamed up ways to give back to the community that had stood by me through the storm. One afternoon, as I was setting a tray of cornbread on the windowsill to cool, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a young woman standing on the porch, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. "Miss Bernice," she asked, her voice trembling. "My name is Alicia. I saw your story in the paper, and I just wanted to thank you. I'm going through something similar, and seeing you stand up for yourself gave me the courage to leave a bad situation." Tears pricked my eyes as I invited her in, listening as she poured out her heart over a cup of tea. We talked for hours, and by the time she left, I knew I wanted to do more than just survive. I wanted to help other women find their strength too. That evening, I sat with my family on the porch, the sky painted in shades of gold and lavender, and shared my idea. "I want to start a support group," I said, my voice steady. "A place where women can come together, share their stories, and help each other rebuild." Marcus grinned, his pride unmistakable. "That's a beautiful idea, Mama. You've always been the heart of this family. Now you can be the heart of something even bigger." Denise squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "You're changing lives, Mama. I'm so proud of you." The next week, with the help of Mavis and a few friends from church, I opened the doors to our first meeting. Women from all walks of life came, some with fresh wounds, others with scars that ran deep, but all of them searching for hope. We laughed, we cried, and we lifted each other up, our voices weaving together into a tapestry of resilience and love. As the weeks passed, the group grew, and so did my sense of purpose. I realized that my story, my pain, my fight, my victory, wasn't just for me. It was a light for others, a reminder that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. One evening, as I closed up after a meeting, Alicia hugged me tight and whispered, "You saved me, Miss Bernice. You gave me the courage to start over." I held her close, my heart full, knowing that this was just the beginning. The past was behind me, the future bright, and for the first time in a long while I felt truly deeply alive. But as I sat on the porch that night, watching the stars blink to life, I knew there was still one more chapter to write, one last act of forgiveness, one final step toward healing. And I was ready to take it, no matter where it led. The morning of my 71st birthday dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the kitchen window as I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and listened to the gentle hum of my family waking up around me. The house was alive with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the sweet voices of my grandchildren singing happy birthday as they brought me a plate of pancakes crowned with strawberries. I looked around the table at Marcus, Denise, Mavis, and Alicia, now a dear friend and volunteer at our women's support group, and felt a wave of gratitude so deep it brought tears to my eyes. After breakfast, we gathered in the living room, where Denise handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet engraved with the words, "Strength, Dignity, Love." I slipped it onto my wrist, my heart swelling with pride and humility. "You taught us what it means to never give up, Mama," Denise said, her voice trembling. "This is just a small thank you for everything you've done." I hugged her tight, overwhelmed by the love that filled the room. Later that afternoon, as the sun warmed the porch, I sat with Mavis and Alicia, sipping sweet tea and reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. "You know," I said, my voice soft, "I used to think my story ended the day Franklin walked out that door. But now I see it was just the beginning. I found my voice, my purpose, and a family stronger than I ever imagined." Mavis smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You're a force, Bernice. You turned pain into power, and you showed us all how to rise." Alicia nodded, her own eyes shining with hope. "You gave me a second chance. I'll never forget that." As the day faded into evening, the house filled with friends and neighbors, all gathered to celebrate not just my birthday, but the new life we'd built together. We danced, we sang, and we shared stories late into the night, the air thick with joy and the promise of tomorrow. Before bed, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen, looking out at the moonlit garden and whispering a prayer of thanks for the strength to endure, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to know that every ending is just a new beginning. I thought of Franklin and Mrs. Pearl wherever they were and felt no anger, only a gentle sadness and a hope that they too might find peace. I thought of Tiana and wished her the clarity to seek a better path. Most of all, I thought of the women who would walk through my door in the months and years to come, each carrying her own story, her own pain, her own hope for healing. I would welcome them all, just as I had been welcomed by the love of my family and friends. As I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to bed, I felt lighter than I had in years, my heart full and my spirit free. This is my true story. My name is Miss Bernice Carter, and if you've ever been betrayed, underestimated, or left behind, I hope you know you are stronger than you think. You can rise, you can heal, and you can build a life more beautiful than you ever dreamed. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight. And remember, no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. Sometimes life will test you in ways you never expected. You might find yourself betrayed by the very people you trusted most, or standing alone when you thought you'd always have someone by your side. But if my story has taught me anything, it's that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from getting back up, again and again, no matter how many times life tries to knock you down. If you were in my shoes, would you have fought for your home and your dignity, or would you have walked away? Have you ever been underestimated only to prove everyone wrong in the end? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Maybe your words will help someone else find their courage too. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight. And remember, no matter how dark it gets, the dawn always comes. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Until next time, this is Miss Bernice Carter.